Robert had thought little of the dusk settling over King's Landing, for he had long become accustomed to the red haze that bathed the city each evening. On certain nights, the sun's dying light would catch the gilded rooftops of the buildings along the Street of the Sisters, making them glow as if all of King's Landing were set aflame. He had watched it countless times from the highest terrace of the Red Keep, or from the yard as he emerged from the training ground. But on this evening, the ruddy sky only kindled his sense of unease. He had returned early from a hunt in the Kingswood, a boar hunt that yielded a single meager kill which he had left for his squires to wrangle. When he had dismounted in the courtyard of the Red Keep, the hush among the servants told him something was amiss. Usually they were quick to greet their king with bows and murmured welcomes, but that evening he sensed wariness in their stares. Many eyes flicked away from him, or never rose from the ground at all. With a grunt, he had unstrapped his sword belt and tossed it to a waiting page. His boots clicked on the stone floor as he crossed the great yard to the keep's interior hall. The king's cloak, a heavy garment of dark cloth trimmed in gold thread, felt oppressive in the near summer heat. So he shrugged it off without ceremony and thrust it toward the nearest attendant. His mind was fixed on the curious hush in the air, and something in him, some primal sense from years in battle, insisted that something was truly wrong. He moved down corridors that were ostentatious yet somehow comfortless. Golden sconces shaped like lions' heads jutted from the walls, but Robert found no pleasure in their artistry. He paused when he saw Sir Barristan Selmy waiting in the shadows near the council chamber. Sir Barristan gave the slightest dip of the head, and Robert glimpsed something akin to sorrow in the old knight's gaze. "What is it?" Robert asked, though his voice rasped across the silence, like a blade scraping a whetstone. "Has something happened?" Sir Barristan always held himself with the dignity of a legend, though his courtesy was gentle. "Your Grace, the Queen, she's not well." "Nee." Robert's face darkened. So Cersei had taken ill. She had seemed hearty enough that morning, though somewhat distant. "Ill how?" "Words have come to your court," Sir Barristan replied softly, "that cast a shadow upon her grace." Robert felt a throb of angry confusion. Varys and his whispers, or something else. Sir Barristan did not flinch, but did not answer directly. He moved aside and gestured, allowing the king to pass first into the chamber. The small council chamber was only half lit, with lamps and candles that flickered upon the wide marble table. Already present were Varys, Petyr Baelish, and Grand Maester Pycelle, each looking various shades of uneasy. Robert cast a cold glance around the room. "What is this about?" he demanded, his voice echoing. "Speak up." Varys, dressed in a soft lilac robe, folded his hands. "Your Grace, it pains me to bring ill news when you have just returned from your hunt. But there is a matter that, well, it cannot wait." Robert slammed a broad hand upon the table, making the lamp nearest Varys rattle. Then out with it. "I've no taste for riddle, Spider." "Now bueno." Lord Baelish, always that faint smile playing on his lips, looked to Varys. "Our mutual friend was made aware that certain rumors have reached not only the kitchens, but also the ears of some in the city watch." His gaze passed sideways toward Robert. "They say the Queen is entangled." "Entangled in what?" Robert's tone was already dangerously low. Varys let out a breath, managing to look both sympathetic and delighted to be delivering secrets, as he so often did. "Rumors swirl, Your Grace, that the child the Queen carries is not of your seed." For an instant, there was silence in Robert's head. The world seemed to tilt, as though someone had struck him behind the ear in a melee. "That's a vile rumor," he spat. "Who dares?" Pycelle gave a slow, tremoring shake of his head. "I fear this rumor is more than idle talk, Your Grace. There have been sightings. Whispers from servants who have walked in on moments that appear far too intimate between the Queen and her brother Jaime." It took Robert several breaths to find his voice. He felt a dawning horror he could hardly contain. "Jaime?" It was scarcely a word so much as a growl rising from his chest. "What nonsense is this?" Lord Baelish coughed lightly. "We are not sure it is nonsense. We have good reason to believe the Queen and Sir Jaime have known each other in ways that siblings should not." Robert could not help the reaction that seized him. He seized the marble edge of the table, hurling it aside in a savage roar. The shriek of wood scraping stone filled the chamber, and the table upended. Lamps toppled, and oil splashed across the floor, sending sparks dancing. For a moment, flame flickered dangerously on the stone, but it died without enough fuel to catch. The men scrambled backward, shocked at the ferocity of Robert's outburst. "Lies!" Robert bellowed, though the moment the word left his mouth he tasted bile. He wanted with all his strength to believe it was a foul rumor conjured by some enemy, some fool. But he had not been blind. He had seen how Jaime and Cersei looked at each other, how the sister's hand sometimes lingered on the brother's arm, how her eyes, so often cold or calculating toward Robert, would soften at Jaime's jests. She'd once brushed away a loose strand of Jaime's golden hair, as though it were the most natural gesture in the world. At the time, Robert had thought little of it. Just Lannister vanity, perhaps. But now, all the stray pieces seemed to rearrange into a hideous picture. He stood there, chest heaving, fists clenched so hard they trembled. "That child," he said, and the words were thick with rage. "That child in her belly is mine. My heirs will not be sullied with the stink of incest." He whipped his gaze around, searching the room. "Where's Ned? I want Ned Stark here," Varys said quietly. "The Lord Hand is inspecting the city watch. We did not wish to trouble him until—" "Find him," Robert hissed. "Bring him here." None of them moved at first, until Robert's glare bored into Baelish. Petyr swallowed and bowed. Ate once, and he was gone, moving quickly from the chamber. Robert stood motionless, but he felt the weight of the entire keep upon his shoulders. A numbness had begun to spread through him, but at the core of it was a burning fury. How long had he been a cuckold beneath his own roof? The swirl of confusion gave way to violent impulses. He wanted to smash the windows, tear down the walls, stand the Kingsguard before him, and make them speak. He wanted to rip Jaime Lannister's head from his shoulders with his bare hands if any of this was true. But before that rage could find full expression, he glimpsed the trembling form of Grand Maester Pycelle. The man was stepping carefully around the overturned table. "My king," the old man whispered. "I beg you, please remain calm. Your health." Robert felt a flare of disgust. Was his health truly so fragile that he could not even rage properly? Without replying, he pressed out of the chamber, leaving the upended table and the flickering puddles of oil behind him. He wanted to see for himself if these rumors might hold a shred of truth. Let them bring Ned. Robert would find Cersei. He would look her in the eye. She might lie to him, but he would know if she lied. He had watched her for years, that porcelain mask of a face. This time, he would see it crack. He went to the Queen's apartments, striding with a sense of dreadful purpose. Servants scattered like startled birds. The castle corridors felt narrower than usual, though perhaps it was simply the intensity of his mood that made them suffocating. He had a half-formed notion of calling the Kingsguard, but at the last moment decided he did not want a single Lannister blade near him, nor near Cersei, until he knew who he could trust. He threw open the doors to Cersei's bedchamber, ignoring the presence of her maids. The Queen stood by the balcony, a pale blue robe draped over her, hair loose about her shoulders. Her green eyes flicked to the maids. At once, the servants scurried out of the room, leaving King and Queen alone. "Robert," she said, as though in protest at his unannounced arrival. He nearly spat. "Enough with your airs." She looked startled. "What has happened?" In that moment, Robert could barely keep his composure. Images reeled through his mind. Jaime and Cersei as children in Casterly Rock, so the story said. They had been inseparable. Jaime had become a Kingsguard, yet remained in the Red Keep near her at all times. There had always been rumors. No, not rumors, jokes. As far as Robert was concerned, dirty jokes that men in taverns told, or the offhand sneer of a man who disliked House Lannister. But could it be real? He took a sharp step forward, and she recoiled slightly. "You and Jaime," he said, hating how ragged his voice sounded. "Is the child you carry his?" Her eyes flashed with momentary panic. Robert saw it before she mastered herself. That was answer enough. She began to say, What nonsense. Don't lie to me, he roared, fists clenched. She stood straighter, forcing her chin up. She was tall, proud, and had worn that imperious look 1,000 times, but never had it looked so brittle. If you have heard vile rumors, I can only guess from which gutter they crawled. My own husband believes them. Yet there was a faint tremor beneath that facade. He felt his heart hammering in his chest. He tried to speak, to keep control. Do you think me a fool? Did you think I wouldn't learn of your secret games? By the gods, woman. With your brother? His voice cracked with disgust, and he took a step back as if she were physically repellent. He saw her gather herself, and then her expression hardened like a queen preparing for battle. You do not know what you speak of. I know enough. I know I saw your eyes just now, trying to hide the truth. He ground his teeth, voice dropping to a low snarl. Answer me truly. Is that child mine or Jaime's? She turned her face away, lips pressed into a thin line. In that small gesture, Robert saw the cold, unwavering anger that seemed more potent than fear. The moment lengthened. You'll stand there silent? Robert's throat felt tight. By the 7, I should. Still. She would not speak. He gave a harsh laugh. So be it. You want to hide behind silence? I'll have the truth from your brother. And if I must drag him from the White Sword Tower and beat it out of him, so be it. He turned on his heel, meaning to storm out, but her voice cut across the room, surprising him with its ferocity. You think I fear your violence? I do not. You are a drunken usurper, living off the bones of a rebellion that ended long ago. You bed whores as you please, flaunting them in the city as if it were a badge of honor. Yet you pretend outrage when your wife looks elsewhere for comfort. Not Arciero. He whirled. Comfort. The word twisted in his mouth. You bed your own brother for comfort? Cersei's face contorted in a fleeting, savage grin. Would you have preferred I whore myself in Flea Bottom? I am a Lannister. I look to my family because that is all I have. In a heartbeat, Robert crossed the space between them, seized her arm, and flung her back against the carved bedpost. He could feel the hot pulse of fury in his blood, could see the defiance in her eyes. It would be so easy to snap, but memory intruded. A memory of how she had once looked on their wedding day. How for a single instant he had believed she might come to love him. How that hope had died for him too. He realized then how thoroughly he despised her, even as he was appalled by her. It was not just what she had done, but the mockery of their marriage. The betrayal that festered in every corner of the Red Keep. He released her with a shove. She stumbled, but did not fall. She stood breathing heavily, a hand braced on her swollen belly. Robert realized with a start that he had nearly hurt his own unborn child, whoever's child it might truly be. The thought made him reel. Lannister whore, he muttered. I'll have your brother's head. By the 7, I'll have your father's as well if he tries to shield you from this. She stared at him, her face stricken but still proud. Then do it, she said through clenched teeth. Prove to the realm you are as monstrous as they claim. He made no reply, only turned and strode from her chamber. His fists were still shaking when he slammed the door. Outside, the corridor was deserted, save for a pair of guards who stood at attention, uncertain of how to react to the king's rage. Robert pushed past them without a word, mind spinning with all manner of violent thoughts. He wanted answers, yet each new answer threatened to crack him further. By the time he reached the small courtyard near Maegor's Holdfast, the air felt suffocating. There, he found Eddard Stark waiting, Baelish a few steps behind him. Ned's face showed apprehension and loyalty in equal measure. Robert took one look at his old friend and beckoned him close. He did not want any Lannister men overhearing, so he waved Baelish aside. Walk with me, Robert growled, and Ned obeyed. They passed beneath an archway, the sound of their boots echoing as they emerged onto a rampart that overlooked Blackwater Bay. The distant tang of salt mingled with the city's rank stench, and the failing sunlight cast their shadows long across the stone. For a time, neither man spoke. Then Robert halted, hands gripping the parapet's edge. Tell me, he said in a gravelly tone, have you heard these rumors about my queen and her twin? Ned paused, measuring his words carefully. Whispers reached the hand of the king from many places. "You have heard them then?" Robert's voice was grim. "I had heard them, yes, your grace." Ned kept his gaze upon the waters of the bay. "But I had no proof, and rumors can be spun from malice." Robert felt a flash of old camaraderie and old anger. Ned might have tried to protect him from the truth. "You should have told me the moment you heard." Ned exhaled, troubled. "I did not wish to speak ill of your queen without proof. Varys came to me with bits of rumor. Littlefinger too, though he thrives on half-truths. If I had found anything certain, I would not have hesitated to come forward, as your friend, if not your hand." Robert stared at Ned's stony countenance, a face he had known for decades. "Well, I have all the proof I need from the Queen's own mouth. She all but admitted it. Or she refused to deny it. She does not fear me." Ned's jaw tightened. "Then, let us speak plainly. What do you intend?" Robert let his gaze linger on the bay, where faint lanterns were beginning to bob on the water. "The child she carries." His voice faltered. "If the rumors are true, then that child is not mine. None of them have been mine, if what I suspect is true. My heirs, all of it, a lie. My father cursed dwarfs or black-haired babes that died in the cradle. Perhaps they were never mine to begin with. By the gods, Ned, I feel I am living in a dream." Ned placed a hand on Robert's shoulder, the simple gesture of an old friend. "We must proceed carefully. Tywin Lannister is not a man to be trifled with, and you are king of the Seven Kingdoms. The realm cannot afford a civil war. If we move against the Queen, we will be moving against House Lannister itself." "Nestor." The words only stoked the fury in Robert's breast. "Let them come. I'll meet Tywin's armies with my hammer in hand, I swear it. I'll smash the Golden Lion to scraps, just as I smashed Prince Rhaegar on the Trident." "Robert," Ned began, "have a care. Whatever you decide, the entire kingdom could be thrown into disarray. War is not an easy thing to be rid of, as you know." But Robert was not in the mood for caution. The old rebellious flame in him flickered anew, fueled by betrayal. "I am the king," he declared. "I will have justice. Am I to let this vile treason go unanswered?" "Treason?" Ned asked, though the answer was plain. "They have dishonored my name, Ned. Jaime was sworn to protect me and my family, and instead he has been rotting with my wife. The pair of them have humiliated me, made me a laughingstock behind closed doors. If that is not treason, what is? House Lannister married their precious daughter to me, and then proceeded to treat me like a fool. If I let it pass, what does that make me?" They walked along the rampart a moment longer. Evening shadows had drawn across the city, but Robert's stormy mood drew a darkness all its own. "At length," Ned said, "perhaps we should gather the council. Seek the best way forward." At those words, Robert's expression soured further. "The council? Pycelle is half a Lannister puppet. Baelish is slippery as an eel, and Varys is always playing his own game. I cannot trust them. Save for you, old friend, and Barristan, perhaps." He turned, facing Ned. "What of Stannis? My brother is always quick to see black and white in such matters. He's the type who'd want heads on spikes. He might be the only other man in the realm who wouldn't flinch at such a scandal." War. Ned's frown deepened. "If you bring Stannis into this, we risk him seizing initiative in a way that might not be best for the realm. You know how he can be. He could well decide that a purge is needed, and by the time he's done, half the city might be dragged into it." Robert murmured. "He would hound every rumor, tear down every whisper. He is thorough, no doubt." He closed his eyes. "I need time to think." But time was one thing the realm rarely afforded its monarchs. High lords were not known to keep secrets, and if talk about Cersei and Jaime was already spreading through the keep, soon the entire city would be afloat with that filthy rumor. The risk of House Lannister learning that Robert believed the rumor to be true was also great. Jaime, Tywin, or Tyrion, someone might act swiftly to protect their own, in ways Robert couldn't yet foresee. Robert's mind reeled with hatred and humiliation, yet somewhere in that swirling storm he recognized a sliver of worry. If House Lannister struck first, they might target him in his own capital. Could they? Jaime might attempt something brash. Or perhaps Tywin would muster an army and ride for King's Landing. The city had the gold cloaks, but the gold cloaks could be bought with the right coin, and it was said no one had deeper pockets than Tywin Lannister. He set his jaw. "I'll not be made a fool in my own city," Ned said softly. "Then we must plan carefully." Robert did not reply. His anger was like a trapped boar, pacing, lashing out. He turned from Ned and headed for the nearest stairwell, ignoring the frightened glances of passing guards. He had no appetite for supper, no stomach for illusions. In the back of his mind, a single refrain pounded. Cersei had admitted nothing, but her face had told him enough. After all these years, their so-called children might be Jaime's bastards. By the gods, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. All of them. The scornful, arrogant boy he despised might not be his at all. He imagined Joffrey's sneering face, and it enraged him that he had ever tried to teach that brat to hunt, or spent coin lavishing him with princely gifts. "I have no true-born heir," he thought bitterly. "The entire line of Baratheon might die with me." He strode through the Red Keep until he reached a lesser-used corridor, one that led near the old Queen's ballroom. Servants scuttled away. He stood there for a time, brooding in the gloom, his breath echoing lightly off the walls. Fury pounded through him with such force that he felt unsteady. Slowly, his gaze rose to the ornate tapestry that hung from the corridor's high ceiling. It portrayed a hunting scene, stags pursued by men with spears and hounds. Robert half wished he were one of those stags, wild, free, bounding away from the chaos that was his life. At length, the echo of footsteps approached. By reflex, Robert straightened, his anger flaring anew. He expected perhaps a guard or some worried council member. Instead, it was Jaime Lannister himself who stepped into view, resplendent in white Kingsguard armor. His cloak, the pure white of the Kingsguard, was pinned with golden lions at the shoulders, an irony that made Robert's blood boil. The Lannister knight had his helm tucked under his arm, golden hair gleaming in the light of a nearby torch. When Jaime's gaze fell upon Robert, the man's confident stride faltered. Something dark flickered across Jaime's expression. Robert did not hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing Jaime by the collar of his white cloak, slamming him against the wall with enough force to rattle the knight's teeth. Jaime's free hand whipped up, perhaps thinking to strike or defend. But Robert pinned him with an arm across his chest. "You dare show your face to me?" Robert growled, hot breath brushing Jaime's cheek. He could smell the faint scent of sweat on the Kingsguard's skin. Jaime's eyes were wide, but not cowardly. The man always had a certain poise that bordered on arrogance. "Your Grace," Jaime managed, though there was no subservience in his tone. "Unhand me." Robert tightened his hold. "Hey, so you can slip away? So you can run to my wife's bedchamber again?" He practically spat the words in Jaime's face. Jaime's jaw tightened. "You know then. What do you have to say for yourself?" Robert demanded, pressing hard. He outweighed Jaime by a good margin, and though Jaime was a fine swordsman, Robert's raw strength could be overwhelming at close quarters. "Have you been rutting with her from the start of this cursed marriage? Or only since the first year?" Jaime's lips curled into something like a smirk, though there was pain in his face where Robert's forearm pressed. "I see you found your wits at last." A red haze clouded Robert's vision, and in a flash of violence, he backhanded Jaime across the face. The crack of flesh on flesh echoed down the corridor. Jaime's head snapped to one side, blood spurting from his split lip. The knight's helm fell from his grasp, clattering to the stone floor. Yet Jaime's gaze remained defiant, if somewhat dazed. "Murder me in the corridor if you must," Jaime snarled through bloodied lips. "It would certainly amuse half the realm, seeing how your father-in-law responds." Robert seized Jaime by the throat now, rage contorting his features. "I should kill you," he said in a deadly hiss. "You have betrayed your vow as Kingsguard. You have betrayed your king." He could barely contain the urge to crush Jaime's windpipe, to end it there in a burst of savage justice. But something within him held him back from that final step. He drew in a ragged breath, forcing words out. "If you do not want me to snap your pretty neck, here and now, you'll confess." Jaime's eyes glimmered with reckless defiance. "Confess?" He let out a mirthless laugh. "I confess nothing, Your Grace, except that you've always been unworthy of the throne you seized. And as for the Queen, she despises you even more than I do." Marie. Another blow landed across Jaime's face, and he groaned, spitting blood. Robert felt the sting in his knuckles. His mind screamed at him to crush the man, to show him no mercy. Yet he hesitated, feeling the centuries of kingship pressing down upon him. If he killed Jaime Lannister without trial, without process, he might well spark a war. Was that what he wanted? Did it matter? In his fury, reason warred with chaos. He released Jaime with a violent shove, sending the knight stumbling to the floor, blood trickling down his chin. Jaime coughed, a savage grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. Robert stood over him, fists trembling. "Consider yourself a dead man walking," he said quietly. "Your father's gold won't save you. If you dare step out of line once more, if you speak to her, if you so much as look at me crosswise, I'll not stay my hand next time." Jaime wiped his lip, then staggered to his feet. "You'll have a war, Baratheon. Best that you crawl back to your tower and pray I change my mind," Robert replied coldly. "If you cross me again, I'll feed you to the crows." He left Jaime standing there, helmet on the floor, a smear of blood on his chin, his white cloak askew. Robert's heart was hammering almost painfully. Once he turned a corner, out of Jaime's line of sight, he braced himself against the wall, breath ragged. The confrontation had awakened an even darker hunger in him, the old lust for conflict. When had he last felt so alive with fury? Not since the days of the rebellion, when he'd faced off against Targaryens and their loyalists. Rage was a potent force, and yet he felt it poisoning him, twisting him from within. By the time he returned to his private solar, Ned was there, along with Barristan Selmy, each man grim and waiting. Robert said nothing at first, only poured himself wine from a flagon on a sideboard. The king's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the cup to his lips. He drained it in 2 long gulps, not caring that some of the wine dribbled onto his beard. Ned's voice was quiet. "Robert, we must be calm. We cannot let the city see you in such a rage. I beg you, let us handle this wisely." Then our baller, Barristan, ever the knight, spoke with a grave gentleness. "Your Grace, I do not know what has transpired between you and Sir Jaime, but I beg you to consider the well-being of the realm." Robert tossed the cup aside. It clanked on the wooden table. "The realm," he repeated bitterly. "What realm is there when the king is mocked in his own bed? House Lannister has made me a fool, and they will pay." Barristan lowered his eyes. "As you will, Your Grace, but war can be a dire path." Robert slumped into a chair, silent for a moment. He was painfully aware of the weariness behind his fury. His shoulders ached, and the rage that had lent him strength mere minutes ago felt like a weight pulling him down. "I've no thirst for a drawn-out war," he said at length, "but I cannot let this pass." Ned exchanged a look with Barristan, then ventured, "We could send a letter to Tywin, summon him to court to answer for his children's conduct, demand he come under safe passage. That might bring him to heel, or at least force him to negotiate." Robert's mouth twisted. "You think Tywin will ever hand over his golden twins for justice?" He barked a laugh, a raw sound. "He'd burn the entire city first. No. That man believes himself above kings. He has always believed it. I saw it in his eyes long ago." Barristan shifted on his feet. "Still, it may give us time to gather loyal bannermen. Reach out to the Stormlands, to the north, to the Vale. Secure their backing so that if Tywin tries anything rash, we are prepared." Robert stared at the old knight. "You speak like a man expecting war. Perhaps you're right. I cannot simply pretend all is well. Cersei is pregnant with that bastard's child. If the Lannisters hold fast, they will surely claim the child as mine, and half the realm will believe it or choose to. They'll put that spawn on the throne after I'm gone. I cannot let that happen. Not to me." Ned's voice was resolute. "We will not allow it. But we must proceed shrewdly, for the sake of your house and your people." Robert nodded slowly, though the words felt hollow. He rose again, unable to remain still. Pacing the solar, he swung an arm as if brandishing his old warhammer. "Is she truly pregnant with Jaime's child? Or is that child mine?" he asked in a sudden, anguished burst. "Or have I fathered any of them? Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, are they all Lannister bastards?" None replied immediately. Ned, at last, ventured, "We must find proof. There is a tale I heard from the old histories and the lineages, that Baratheon blood is resilient, your grace. Dark of hair. Yet your supposed children? Joffrey's hair is gold as the Lannisters. So is Myrcella's. So is Tommen's. It is a curious thing, if I may say so." "Bear." Robert was silent, remembering back to the woman he had bedded in the Vale, in the Stormlands, in taverns across the land. Every bastard he had sired, if he believed the stories, carried his dark hair. One boy in particular, Gendry, they said, was the spitting image of Robert in his youth. Yet his so-called royal children, each fair as gold. The weight of betrayal pressed heavily upon him. He looked at Ned and Barristan. "Then it is clear," Robert said. "None of them are mine. I was made a cuckold from the start. Tywin and his brood must be laughing themselves hoarse, calling me a drunken, ignorant fool. By all the gods, I want their heads." "Ban." Barristan bowed his head, sadness flickering across his features. "Your grace, command us. My sword is yours as always. Yet I beg you to act in a way that keeps the realm as whole as possible." The realm. Robert spat the words. Yet he knew it was his duty. He had seized the throne once in the name of justice, to overthrow a mad king. Now ironically, he might see the realm plunged into blood again. Was it worth it? The fury inside him said yes. His battered conscience, though, whispered caution. He wondered if perhaps he was no better than the Targaryen he had helped overthrow, lashing out in wrath and wounded pride. He sank back into a chair, pressing the heels of his hands to his temples, trying to ward off a headache that was quickly rising. "I will give you my decision soon. For now, spread no official word. Double the guard around the Red Keep, especially near the Queen's chambers. I do not want Jaime or any Lannister with free reign." Ned nodded once. "As you will, your grace." Barristan inclined his head. "I will see it done." They left him in the solar, though Ned paused at the threshold, casting a concerned glance at his friend and king. Robert waved him away. When he was alone, the king poured another cup of wine. He raised it to his lips with trembling hands, fighting back the swirl of anger and despair that threatened to unman him. He downed the liquor and poured a second cup. This time, draining only half. He stared at the thick red of it, the color reminiscent of Lannister crimson. For a moment, he felt ill. He flung the goblet across the room, where it shattered against a tapestry, scattering droplets of red. It looked like blood spattered on the woven scenes. Perhaps it was a fitting omen. He staggered to the window, leaning his forehead against the cool stone. The sky was now nearly black, studded with faint stars, and King's Landing below him gleamed with torchlight along its walls. Far off, the ocean rolled. Robert closed his eyes. His thoughts churned from memory to memory. The trident, Rhaegar's rubies scattering in the water. Lyanna dying in a bed of blood. The day he wed Cersei, her face a stony mask throughout the ceremony. His crowning, the cheers that had filled the halls. It all felt so far away. This new betrayal overshadowed everything, scraping raw the old wounds he thought had healed. He imagined ways it might end. Could he quietly smother the scandal, pass the child off as his? But the very idea made him taste bile. He had never been one for secrets. Or could he send Cersei to a distant castle, lock her away as some kings had done in ages past? The thought gave him no satisfaction. She was the queen of the realm in name, but in truth, she was the whore of her own brother. Fury welled anew at the notion. She deserved death for this, and so did Jaime. Yet he could not simply strike them down without unleashing the lion's wrath in all its power. In the corridor beyond, Robert heard movement, the shift of boots, the hush of a guard. He realized he should call for more wine, then thought better of it. The wine might help him forget for a moment, but the truth would remain, and he would be no closer to a decision. The realm balanced precariously, on the edge of a blade, and he was the king. Whether he willed it or not, he had to find a path that would not destroy them all. When he finally pulled back from the window, he glanced to the tapestry where his goblet had splashed. The wine, drying in thick drops, resembled fresh blood upon the woven hunting scene. It struck him that this day might be the first of many dark days to come. He, Robert Baratheon, had always prided himself on being a man of direct action. But now the fate of the kingdom demanded more than war cries and head bashings. It demanded cunning, alliances, and calculated moves. Things he had never excelled at. He clenched his fists, a growl building in his throat. "I am the king," he whispered to the empty room, as though that title alone might lend him the cunning he needed. The walls gave no answer, and the hallway beyond was silent. Only the distant caw of a raven, floating through the night air, broke the hush. A knock sounded at the door. Robert drew a breath, forcibly calming himself. "Enter," he called. A guard stepped in, helm under his arm. "Your Grace," said the man, bowing swiftly. "Lord Stark requests permission to gather the small council in the morning, to discuss a matter of urgency. He sends his apologies for disturbing you." Robert exhaled. Ned was acting to ensure some measure of order. "Very well," he said, his voice rough. "In the morning." The guard nodded and disappeared, leaving the king once more to his solitude. Robert walked to the sideboard, running a hand across the polished wood. He considered the flagon of wine. His mouth felt dry, but he resisted. He needed his wits. Gazing back at the starlit sky, he let out a ragged breath. Cersei didit. Jaime Porti. Bastards in the line of the Baratheons. Betrayal upon betrayal. Perhaps it was truly the Lannister motto that best fit the moment. "Hear me," roared Guinan. So, they had roared indeed. Quietly and cunningly, in the shadows of his own court. Now they would see just how loudly the stag could bellow in return. He did not know yet how he would orchestrate the downfall of those who had made a mockery of him. But he vowed that this would not stand. For tonight, he would let the realm lie still, unsuspecting of the storm gathering in the Red Keep. On the morrow, the first steps would be taken. He would face the small council, look them in the eye, and lay the seeds of retribution. Cersei might try to flee. Jaime might try to kill him. Tywin might prepare to march, but Robert would be ready. The thought of war both horrified and electrified him. Deep down, he recognized that some savage part of him craved it. If this was how his reign would be tested, then so be it. If the Seven had turned their backs on him, let them watch from above as he settled the matter himself. He closed the door on the memory of Jaime's bloodied lip and Cersei's hateful glare, forcing his weary feet to move to his bed. Removing his tunic, he let out a hiss of pent-up breath. Tomorrow, he thought again, darkness creeping into his mind. But as he lay upon his bed, the coolness of the linen sheets could not quell the heat of his anger. Sleep came only after hours of twisting in frustrated half-dreams. And when sleep finally claimed him, it came with visions of a lion and a stag, locked in a mortal fight, teeth and antlers, roaring and bellowing, blood splashing on the ground. He awoke more than once in a sweat, each time remembering with fresh horror that the truth was not a dream, but a living nightmare, waiting for him with the coming dawn. E.K. Oma. Dawn came slowly in King's Landing. The first gray light seeped through the tall windows of the Red Keep, illuminating the dust motes that drifted in the corridors. Servants began their morning tasks with hushed caution, for word had spread of the king's fierce mood the night before. The hush that had settled like a pall did not lift even as the sun's rays grew stronger. It was as though everyone sensed a reckoning was at hand, and they feared what it might bring. Robert awoke early despite his restless night. The bedclothes were tangled around his legs, and sweat dampened his brow. He pushed himself up and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling as though a smith had hammered his skull throughout the dark hours. Memories of the previous evening rushed in. Cersei's bitter confession in her silence, The confrontation with Jaime, the blood on the knight's lip. It all slammed into Robert with the force of a battering ram. He rose, clad in a thin bedrobe, and crossed to the window. Even from his chamber, he could see a slice of the city below, its myriad rooftops bleary under early daylight. Small fires burned in hearths, sending tendrils of smoke curling into the sky. An ordinary day, it would seem, but there was nothing ordinary in Robert's world anymore. His children, no, they were not his. Their mother had cuckolded him with her own brother. The thought made his breath catch in a mingling of rage and despair. He heard footsteps outside his door, and then a timid knock. "Your Grace?" came the voice of a servant. "Shall I bring water? A meal?" "Water," he replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'll see to the rest myself." The dryness in his throat told him he should avoid wine, at least for the moment. Best to keep his head clear. When the servant arrived with a basin of water and a cloth, Robert dismissed him after a quick bow. He splashed his face, let the chill of the water shock some wakefulness into him, then ran a hand through his dark, graying hair. He regarded himself in the small mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, the lines in his face deeper than before. The reflection felt like that of a stranger. He dressed without ceremony, choosing breeches and a plain leather jerkin under a half-cloak that bore his house sigil in muted colors. He had no taste for finery that day. When he was ready, he ventured into the corridor, ignoring the hush that descended on any passerby who glimpsed him. He made his way to the small council chambers. Along the way, he encountered Sir Barristan Selmy, who fell in step beside him. "Your Grace?" Barristan said quietly. "Lord Stark and the council await." "Is she coming?" Robert asked, though the anger in his voice had dulled to a rasp. Barristan cleared his throat. "The Queen has not been summoned, as far as I know. Nor has Sir Jaime." Robert gave a curt nod. "Good. I've no wish to see either of them this morning." As they continued on, the torchlit corridors broadened, leading to an antechamber where two goldcloaks stood guard at the doors. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. He recognized them only vaguely, which meant they were likely loyal to the coin that paid them. And which purse was heavier in the city, his or Tywin's? That question lingered in his mind, sowing a new seed of mistrust. Nonetheless, the guards opened the doors, and Robert stepped into the council chambers with Barristan by his side. Inside, around the broad table, sat Eddard Stark, Petyr Baelish, Grand Maester Pycelle, and Varys. The table had been righted after the king's fury of the previous evening, and a few scorch marks still marred the stone floor where the lamp oil had spilled. Ned stood at once upon seeing Robert, offering a respectful incline of the head. Baelish offered a courteous bow, while Varys merely lowered his chin, that knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Pycelle rose stiffly, his chain of office rattling around his shoulders. Robert took a moment to stand in silence, letting the weight of his presence settle. He swept his gaze over them. "Sit," he said at last. "We have much to discuss." Ned resumed his seat, jaw set. Baelish placed his hands together, waiting. Pycelle sank down with a faint wince, while Varys arranged the sleeves of his robe delicately. Robert and Sir Barristan took places at the head of the table. For a while no one spoke. The king's voice came low and calm, though it rippled with tension. "I suppose you've all heard the rumors," he said, and in that moment it seemed as though the air had grown heavier. "Some of you have known for a while, haven't you? That my wife is lying with her brother." "Daw." Pycelle's mouth opened in a semblance of shock. "Your Grace, these are grave accusations." "The Queen." "Do not play the fool," Robert snapped, cutting him off. "I'm done with secrets, Pycelle. Save your false surprise. By the gods, I know how close you are to House Lannister's gold." The maester's jowls quivered in an attempt at indignation, but he clamped his mouth shut. Robert pressed on, turning his gaze to Baelish. "Littlefinger, you love secrets. You knew, didn't you?" Baelish lifted his brows with a disarming half-smile. "I had suspicions, Your Grace, as many do in my position. But one can never be sure until the truth is spoken." Robert's nostrils flared. He hated how slippery Baelish was, how easily the man seemed to glide around accusations. Instead, He pivoted his gaze to Varys. And you, Spider? Did you confirm these rumors? Varys dipped his head. I have many little birds, as you know. They sing all manner of tunes. I admit that, in the past, I received whispers of impropriety. Such rumors are not easy to verify without direct witness, and I judged it wiser to proceed cautiously. Then lost. Cautiously, Robert echoed, voice harsh. While my throne is made a fool's seat. Your Grace. Varys said softly, my sole aim has always been the good of the realm. Robert almost laughed at the hypocrisy. Instead, he leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. Hear me now, all of you. I have reason to believe the Queen has conceived a child by Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer. Perhaps all the so-called royal children are Lannister spawn. Do any of you deny it? Mandir. Silence seized the room. Baelish's gaze flicked around, measuring the others. Pycelle looked as though he might protest, but he merely swallowed. Varys pursed his lips in a show of regret. Finally Ned spoke, voice steady. Your Grace, we do not deny it. The hair color alone suggests the children may not be yours. I have studied the lineages, as have others. Your house is known for its dark hair. Robert stared at the polished wood of the table, a wave of sorrow and fury mingling. Then let us speak plainly of treason. She has laid with her brother. That is an abomination against the laws of gods and men. The succession has been corrupted. I will not tolerate it. Baelish smoothed his goatee, ever the calculating observer. What do you intend to do, Your Grace? Robert's voice came as a growl. I want them punished. Both of them. If Cersei is carrying Jaime's bastard, she will not remain queen. Jaime will not remain breathing if I have my way. Ned bowed his head, speaking gently. Before we rush to action, we must consider the ramifications. The Lannisters hold much power. Tywin Lannister's gold buys him many swords. The alliances formed with House Tyrell and others hinge on political advantage. If we provoke them without allies in place, the realm could erupt in a war we are ill prepared for. Now, Robert looked to Barristan. The old knight's face was grave. Lord Stark speaks true, Your Grace. A swift blow against the Lannisters might seem righteous, but it could lead to civil conflict. We must rally loyal lords to our cause. Robert felt the sting of old frustrations. He had never liked the dance of politics, but he knew enough to see the sense in their words. Tywin Lannister would not stand idle if his children were threatened. And if the rumors about the children's parentage were made public, the Lannisters might act to protect Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen by force of arms, claiming any challenge to their legitimacy was an attempt to destroy House Lannister itself. His fists tightened. So be it. We will move carefully. I will send word to my brothers, Stannis at Dragonstone, Renly in the Reach. Summon loyal bannermen from the Stormlands, from the north, from the Vale. Quietly, so as not to raise immediate alarm. We will gather the men we need. Basiri. And what of the Queen? Pycelle ventured nervously. Robert glanced at him. She remains in the Red Keep under guard. I want her watched at all times, but do not openly imprison her. Jaime Lannister is to be stripped of his duties until further notice, though keep him under guard as well. If either tries to flee, they are to be stopped by any means. Is that clear? A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Robert could sense their unease, but none dared object. Even Baelish, who normally might quip about the cost of so many watchers, remained silent. Varys simply folded his hands, a contemplative expression on his face. Robert suspected the spymaster was already calculating the next move, deciding which side to choose if events escalated. Ned leaned forward. Your Grace, might I suggest that we first secure the gold cloaks? If we do not have the city watch in hand, the Lannisters could sway them. That must be our priority. Robert nodded curtly. Very well. Speak to them yourself. We will pay them from the royal treasury if need be, and we will replace any captain who shows disloyalty. Baelish, see that the coin is made available. Baelish inclined his head. As you wish, Your Grace, though I suspect it may be costly. Pay it, Robert said flatly. We cannot have our own city turned against us. Ned rose then, with the solemn air of a man accepting a burden. I will begin at once. Varys, I may need your help identifying which officers have Lannister leanings. The spider offered a slight bow. As always, my services are at the disposal of the realm. That concluded the most urgent business. Robert dismissed them all, save for Ned and Barristan, whom he bade remain. Pycelle, Baelish and Varys departed, their steps echoing in the hallway. Robert stood, bracing his hands on the table. He turned to Ned. Send ravens to my brothers. Keep the message vague. Only that I need them at court, or at least I need their men. You can add that I have reason to distrust House Lannister and require them as a show of solidarity. They will guess the rest soon enough. Ned nodded. I will write at once. Do you want ravens sent to any lords in particular? Then Cersei. Jon Arryn's seat is now inherited by that foolish child in the Eyrie, Robert muttered, and it pained him to remember that Jon Arryn was gone, the man who had been a second father to both him and Ned. Lysa is skittish, no help there. But we can appeal to the families of the Stormlands, the Selmy family, the Tarths, the Swans. We'll want men from the Reach too, but the Tyrells have always been close to the Lannisters. We might need Renly's presence for that. Ned took in the information. I'll see to it, Robert. Barristan cleared his throat gently. Your Grace, you should be aware that Sir Jaime retains some support among the Kingsguard, as does the Queen. They may resist any direct attempt to confine him. It might be wise to replace certain members. Robert grimaced. The Kingsguard had once been an order he respected, back when legends like Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Barristan himself stood among them. Yet now, it was tainted by the presence of Jaime Lannister. Still, Robert hesitated to tear apart the institution. Which ones do you suspect? Barristan's features tightened. Sir Meryn Trant and Sir Boros Blount might be easily swayed by gold. Sir Aerys Oakheart remains loyal, I believe, but he is young. Sir Preston Greenfield, I cannot say. Sir Mandon Moore came to court through Pettier Baelish's recommendation, which complicates matters. Robert let out a bark of frustration. This entire city reeks of Lannister corruption. For now, place them under your command directly. Tell them they answer to you or face the king's wrath. I need time to find replacements worthy of the White Cloak. Well, Barristan placed a hand over his heart. As you say, Your Grace. The three men shared a meaningful look. They had begun to lay plans, but a sense of impending conflict hung over them like a thundercloud. There was no easy resolution to this. Robert told himself that he had marched to war before, and if needed, he would do so again. But a part of him regretted that it had come to this, that his marriage had turned into a twisted conspiracy, that the children he had welcomed into his halls bore another man's blood. When they parted, Ned headed straight for his own chamber to write the letters, while Barristan made for the barracks to exert control over the Kingsguard. Robert was left with his swirling thoughts. He paced the corridors, restless. It was still early enough that many in the castle had not yet woken, but soon the day's bustle would begin in earnest. He wanted to see for himself if Jaime and Cersei had obeyed his implicit order to remain under watch. First, he made his way toward the Kingsguard's White Sword Tower. Guards stationed at the entrance bowed stiffly, and Robert observed them with a suspicious eye. "Is there Jaime within?" he asked. One guard nodded. Robert grunted. As he tried to leave, the guard shook his head, voice subdued. "No, Your Grace. He has been inside all night. Sir Mandon Moore is watching him." That was some relief, though Robert had little trust in Moore. He passed inside, ascending a spiraling staircase. Even in the light of day, the inside of the tower was dim. The walls hung with the white banners of the Kingsguard. On the landing, Robert encountered Sir Mandon, his pale eyes revealing nothing. The man bowed deeply. "Your Grace," he said, "Sir Jaime is in his chamber." "I'll see him," Robert growled. Mandon stepped aside. "At once, Your Grace." Robert climbed a few more steps until he reached a door reinforced with iron. Another guard stood there. This one wore the colors of House Baratheon, sent by Ned perhaps. Good, Robert thought. At least one man I can trust for now." He motioned for the guard to open the door. Inside, Sir Jaime Lannister sat at a small table, a plate of untouched bread and cheese before him. His face bore a fresh bruise on the cheek where Robert had struck him the night before, and his lip was scabbed over. He was no longer in the gleaming white armor. Instead, he wore a simple tunic of deep crimson, the Lion of Lannister embroidered subtly at the collar. At Robert's entrance, Jaime lifted his head, eyes gleaming. A faint sardonic smile curved his lips. "Good morning, Your Grace," Jaime said. The words edged with mockery. Robert closed the door behind him, waving the guard away so they had a measure of privacy. He felt his blood heat up at the sight of this man who had betrayed him so vilely. But he forced himself to remain in control. "I trust you understand you are no longer free to roam the castle." Jaime spread his hands in a theatrical gesture. "I see you have me under lock and key. A proud day for the Kingslayer indeed. Though I wonder, does this not shame you? Jailing one of your sworn protectors on rumor alone." "Spare me your jibes," Robert snarled. "We both know the rumors are true." Jaime's smile widened slightly, but it held no warmth. "Do we now?" Robert took a step forward. "I should take your head. The only thing that stays my hand is the fear that your father would respond by bathing the city in blood." Jaime cocked his head. "He might do that, yes. Our father is not known for his forgiving nature, nor is he known to let slights against House Lannister pass unanswered." Robert clenched a fist. "Do not toy with me, Lannister. I'll have my justice, one way or another." Jaime leaned back in his chair, feigning a casual air. "What do you call justice?" "A show trial ending with me beheaded in the yard. And the Queen, your dear wife, perhaps burned at the stake for her sin. I wonder how the lords of Westeros would receive that tale. A king who executes his queen for incest. Would that not cast a dark shadow over your throne?" Robert's teeth ground so hard he thought they might crack. He realized Jaime was goading him, needling him to see how far he could be pushed. "You've never respected the crown, have you? You proved that when you slew Aerys, though the realm hailed you for it. But now, you disgrace your sacred vow by bedding the queen. My wife, you bastard." "Man?" Jaime shrugged. "She was never yours, truly." Robert's hand rose before he could stop himself, and he backhanded Jaime again, though with less force. The knight's head snapped to the side, blood reopening on his lip. Jaime swallowed, breathing through clenched teeth. "Get it out of your system," he said quietly, his tone no longer mocking but full of bitterness. "Beat me senseless if you like. It changes nothing." Robert breathed heavily, stepping back. He realized that any moment more in Jaime's presence would stoke his fury anew. There was a time he would have hammered the man into the ground without regard for consequences. But that was when life seemed simpler, when his throne was still fresh with victory and his spirit unbroken by years of courtly intrigue. "Stay here," Robert said, voice quivering with restrained rage. "If you try to flee, you'll die. If you try to stir trouble, you'll die. That is your life now, Kingslayer." Jaime dabbed at his lip and offered one last half-laugh, half-sigh. "Very well, my king." With a final glare, Robert turned and left, the door slamming behind him. Outside, he paused to regain his composure, ignoring the curious glance of the guard. Soon, he descended the tower steps and emerged into the morning light. Servants moved about the courtyard, carrying baskets of produce, loading carts, all engaged in the daily business of sustaining the castle. Robert felt like an intruder in his own kingdom, a man set apart by the knowledge of betrayal. He headed next to the royal apartments, where Cersei's quarters were located. He wanted to see if she was contained as well. When he arrived, he found a cluster of the Queen's maids in the corridor, wringing their hands. A pair of Baratheon guards stood by, their faces emotionless. They bowed as Robert approached. One said, "Your Grace, the Queen is within. She has not emerged this morning." Robert made a curt sound of acknowledgement. He suspected she was not sleeping well either. Part of him wanted to tear into her chambers, but he resisted. What point was there in repeating their confrontation? He already knew her scorn and her hatred. He had let that rage out once. He would accomplish nothing by further haranguing her. Still, He lingered, uncertain. Just then, the door cracked open a sliver, and a single maid peered out. Seeing Robert, she startled. "Your Grace," she whispered. "Shall I tell the Queen you wish to see her?" He frowned. "No. Let her wait. I have no desire to look on her face. Ensure she is attended to, but do not let her leave her chambers without escort. Understood?" The maid bowed her head. "Yes, Your Grace." As Robert turned, he spotted something, a golden lion's head pendant that one of the maids wore around her neck. No doubt, a gift from the Queen. He eyed it with contempt, then strode away. Once beyond earshot, he let out a long breath. His mind felt cluttered with half-formed plans and bitter regrets. He needed counsel, or at least a moment's respite. He found himself wandering the ramparts again. The same place where he had confided in Ned the night before. A breeze from Blackwater Bay ruffled his cloak, carrying the faint salt-tinged odor of low tide. He leaned over the parapet, eyes roving across the sprawl of the city. King's Landing was immense, bustling with thousands upon thousands of souls, most of whom had no inkling that their king's marriage was in tatters, that war might soon come to their doorstep. Below, in the courtyard near the main gates, a line of small folk waited to petition the crown with grievances. Land disputes, requests for relief from taxes, pleas for royal justice in some petty matter. Robert wondered how trivial all their complaints would seem if blood were spilled in the capital. He thought of the last war, the rebellion, and how many had died for the sake of deposing a mad king. Now, ironically, Robert found himself in a predicament that might lead to even more carnage, all because his wife had bedded her brother and borne his children. A grunt escaped him. What had he expected? Marrying Cersei Lannister at Tywin's urging. He recalled the day of the wedding, how he had been too drunk to notice the glint of resentment in Cersei's eyes, how her father had pressed the match as a means to unify Crown and Westerlands. Perhaps he had always been a stepping stone for House Lannister's ambitions. Even as king, he had let himself be used. The realization hurt in ways that felt almost physical. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Ned approaching with measured steps. Robert shook his head, unable to hide a wry, joyless smile. "You always know where to find me, old friend." Ned offered a faint nod. "We are creatures of habit, Robert. I thought you might be here." They stood side by side a moment, silence stretching between them. Robert glanced at his friend's solemn countenance. "You've sent the ravens?" Ned replied with a sigh. "Yes, they are on their way. I wrote with caution. Stannis will likely read between the lines at once. Renly too, in his own way. If they come swiftly with men, we may have a strong force to check the Lannisters." Robert nodded, though some part of him wondered if Stannis would relish the chance to punish a queen's infidelity. Stannis was strict in matters of law. He would not be merciful. But would Renly stand so firmly, or would he have other designs? Robert felt too exhausted to dissect the possibilities. "Good," he said gruffly. "Have you spoken to the Goldcloaks?" "I have," Ned answered. "Captain Janos Slynt claims loyalty to the crown, but he seemed uneasy. When I hinted that the Lannisters might try to sway him, he assured me his men follow him alone. I do not entirely trust him, but with enough coin, we might ensure his compliance." Robert grimaced. "I see that Baelish doesn't pinch the purse too tightly. For all his sly ways, that man does know how to shuffle coin around." They gazed out at the city. The sun was higher now, painting the rooftops in bright light. Yet to Robert it felt like a mockery. Darkness clung to his thoughts. He turned to Ned, weighing his words. "If war comes, do you think we can hold this city? If Tywin marches with the full might of the Westerlands, we would need the Stormlands, the North, and the Vale to stand with us." "I don't know if Lysa Tully will help, though." Ned's face was grave. "You know the Vale is in disarray. Lady Lysa fears for her son's safety. She has barricaded herself in the Eyrie, refusing to come to court. We cannot rely on her unless we can offer some guarantee of protection. But the North will follow me if I call upon them. The Stormlands are sworn to you, and Stannis commands Dragonstone Dol. Renly may bring the support of some in the Reach, though the Tyrells remain a question." "Days." Robert set his jaw. "It's a mess, Ned." Ned said softly. "But what choice do we have? We cannot let the realm be ruled by a lie, by an incestuous line. It would tear the Seven Kingdoms apart eventually, if not now. Then later." Robert nodded. He placed a hand on Ned's shoulder, the old camaraderie flickering. "Thank you, my friend. I suppose I lean on you far too much, but you are the one man I know I can trust." "Then, Mr." Ned gave a small, sad smile. "We stood together during the rebellion. We stand together now. Do what you must, Robert, but do not lose yourself to anger. The realm needs a strong king, not a vengeful one." Robert studied the horizon. King's Landing seemed so peaceful from this height, the bustle and squalor reduced to a faint murmur. "I'm not sure I know how to be strong without anger," he murmured, almost to himself. "But I'll try." They parted again, each weighed down by duty. Robert spent the rest of the morning in slow, methodical conversations, giving instructions to stewards, ensuring that messages were sent to the Stormlords, quietly ordering the mustering of additional men-at-arms in the Red Keep. He spotted Baelish darting through the halls, no doubt greasing palms and counting coin as he went. Varys appeared here and there, whispering to various functionaries. The tension in the castle thickened with each passing hour. Near midday, Robert found himself hungrier than expected, so he went to the Great Hall. But the sight of high lords and ladies eating was too much. Already there were curious stares. Rumors must be flying that the king had quarreled with the queen. Some might have heard more. Robert did not have the stomach for it. He took a plate of roast and bread in a side chamber, swallowing bites mechanically. Afterward, he returned to his private solar, uncertain how else to fill the anxious hours. More than once, he thought of going to see Cersei, to force a final confession from her. But the image of her contemptuous gaze stopped him. Instead, he paced around the solar, recalling that night's conversation with Jaime. A part of him wanted to drink himself into oblivion. Another part wanted to gather a dozen men and simply storm the White Sword Tower, cut Jaime down where he stood, and accept the war that would follow. But Ned's words about caution echoed in his mind, and so he paced, seethed, and waited. This was the ugly truth about kingship. It was not merely a matter of swinging a hammer. The realm could not be held together by brute force alone. Time crawled. The sun shifted high in the sky, then began its slow descent. Occasionally, messengers came bearing small updates. The ravens had flown to Dragonstone, to Storm's End, to other loyal seats. Some of the city's watch captains had sworn to uphold their loyalty to the king. Cerberistan had taken the unusual step of rotating the King's Guard's schedule so that Jaime was effectively never left without watchers. All was proceeding according to plan, but it felt too slow for Robert's raging heart. Late in the afternoon, he took himself outside, crossing the yard to the training grounds. A few knights were sparring there. They bowed when they saw him. Robert waved them off, stepping onto the beaten dirt. He had worn no armor, only his loose shirt and breeches. But the sight of the rack of arms stirred something in him. He seized a blunted practice sword without explanation. The knights exchanged startled looks but quickly resumed their stances. Robert glowered at them. "Come then," he said. "I need to move." One knight, a stout man with an overlong mustache, stepped forward tentatively. "Your Grace, I'm not sure." "Fight me," Robert snapped. "I won't break." With no further protest, the knight lifted his own practice blade. They circled each other. Robert could almost taste his own pent-up rage as he swung, putting more force into it than he intended. The knight blocked, but the impact reverberated through the yard, drawing stares from nearby squires. They traded blows. Robert advanced, each strike fueled by the frustration that had been festering all day. Though the knight defended well enough, Robert's aggression soon overwhelmed him. A heavy blow caught him in the side, sending him stumbling. Robert did not relent. He pressed forward, ignoring the sweat beading on his brow. Another strike hammered the knight's blade aside, and a third made him drop it altogether. Finally, the knight sank to his knees. Robert stood over him, breathing hard, the practice sword raised. For a moment, he imagined Jaime kneeling there instead, That golden hair matted with dirt. A sneer turned into a plea. The image sparked a savage satisfaction. "Yield," Robert growled, though he knew the knight already had. "Ah, yes, your grace." The man stammered. His eyes were wide, uneasy. Robert realized he was trembling. Abruptly, the king lowered his sword. He felt a flicker of shame. The knight was no enemy, merely a man unfortunate enough to face the king's wrath in a sparring yard. Robert muttered a curt apology and helped the man to his feet. Then he tossed the practice blade aside and stalked away, ignoring the stares from those present. He could not burn off this rage so easily. It lingered in his bones, coiled in the pit of his stomach. If only smashing a practice sword against a knight's shield could fix what had been broken in his marriage, in his reign. But the hurt was deeper than that. A wound that no mere weapon could seal. As twilight approached, he knew he would pass another restless night. But he had no intention of ignoring the matters at hand. He ordered a meeting with Ned, Barristan, and any lord still present in the Red Keep who might stand with the crown. They would discuss further steps, ensure that the gold cloaks remained loyal, plan for the arrival of Stannis and Renly. There would be 1,000 details to manage. Logistics, messaging, bribes, intimidation, all of the distasteful trappings of a king's power. Before making his way to that gathering, Robert paused outside the council chamber, gaze straying to a high, narrow window. The sky beyond was awash in the dusky oranges and purples of sunset. His father once told him that in a time of crisis, a king must be as steadfast as stone. But Robert felt more like a storm at sea, buffeted by waves of betrayal. Jaime's mocking words echoed in his mind, and so did Cersei's poison-laced scorn. He inhaled slowly, steeling himself. No matter how searing his anger, he had to keep his wits. The realm hung in the balance. His father's line, House Baratheon, might fall if he proved too reckless, if he let vengeance blind him. He despised needing to rein himself in, but he would do it. For the throne he had bled for the memory of Lyanna, and the friend Jon Arryn who had believed in him. He would see this through. At last, he turned from the window and entered the chamber, footsteps echoing in the hush. Ned was already there, studying a map of the kingdoms. Barristan stood nearby, arms folded, silent as a statue. Pycelle hovered by the side, and Baelish lounged in a corner, one leg crossed over the other, wearing an ambiguous smile. Varys stood behind him, a watchful presence in lilac robes. They all looked to Robert. He cleared his throat. "Let us begin." And so they did, as the final colors of the day faded from the sky, and night crept across the city, an uneasy darkness that seemed to mirror the grim state of the realm's affairs. A.K. Robert found the council gathered around the large oaken table. Light from flickering torches fell upon scattered parchments, and a map of Westeros splayed out in the center. The mood in the room felt too calm for the turmoil roiling inside him. He took his seat, flanked by Ned Stark and Sir Barristan Selmy, and for a long while he said nothing. He let his gaze settle on each face in turn. Varys with his watchful gaze and polite half-smile. Littlefinger with his faintly mocking air. Grand Maester Pycelle, shifting nervously, fingers toying with the chain of his office. They were all waiting for him to speak, to give direction and shape to what had thus far been a swirl of rumor and private fury. When at last Robert cleared his throat, the hush deepened, as if the very air of the chamber were holding its breath. "Matters are in motion," he began, voice rasping slightly from the day's tension. "You all know what has passed between me and the Queen's brother. There is no undoing that knowledge. Now, we must decide how best to secure the city and the throne." He watched them absorb this. Ned inclined his head once, a show of agreement. Barristan remained stone-faced, though the flicker in his eyes showed his deep unease. Varys lowered his gaze as though in polite deference. Baelish was the first to speak. "Your Grace," Littlefinger said, in the careful tone of a man navigating a nest of vipers, "we are making arrangements with the gold cloaks. My men are prepared to distribute coin where needed. A few of the watch captains have uncertain loyalties. Bribery will shore up their devotion to the crown. Your crown. just as we planned. I trust that my humble efforts meet with your approval. Nah. Robert felt the old temptation to bark at him for his oily manner, but he checked himself. Instead, he let out a single grunt. Yes. See to it. Make it known that any man loyal to the king will have his pockets filled. Any who might sell themselves to the Lannisters, well, we pay better. Baelish permitted himself a small, triumphant smile. As you command, your grace. Robert shifted his attention to Pycelle. The Grand Maester looked as though he wanted to vanish within his robes. And you? Are you still feeding the Lannisters your counsel, or can I trust you not to slip them word of what's said in this room? Mammon, era. Pycelle's wrinkled face reddened. Your grace, I serve the crown, I assure you. House Lannister. My loyalty to them is only that which was demanded by the courtesy of my station. I live to serve the realm. He managed a quavering bow. If it please you, I will do all in my power to aid your cause, as is my solemn duty. Robert gave a short, humorless laugh. Well, mind you don't forget it. He glanced next at Varys, who merely waited with that soft-lipped calm. Robert almost challenged the spymaster to prove his loyalty, but in truth, what was there to say? Varys would do as he always had. Gather secrets, weigh them, and act in whatever way he deemed best for his so-called good of the realm. For the moment at least, Varys seemed content to side with the king. Robert would keep an eye on him nonetheless. He took a moment to run a hand over his stubble, the day's growth pricking his palm. Now, about these damned ravens. Ned has sent word to my brothers and to certain loyal lords. We must prepare for the possibility of Tywin Lannister making a move. I doubt he'll sit idle. He might not strike tomorrow or the day after, but he will not let this insult pass. Ned spoke quietly. We must also consider the possibility that Tywin could act in secret, assassins, or cunning ruses. He might try to remove certain key figures in the court before assembling an open host. I believe it wise to tighten security around you, Robert, and around the Hands offices, the coin vaults, the granaries. Tywin is not the type to stand on ceremony. Robert nodded. Do it. Barristan, ensure additional guards are posted on every crucial location. Choose men you trust, not green boys or those too close to the Lannisters. Barristan placed a hand to his heart. I will see to it, your grace. Robert's gaze shifted to the map on the table. The image of Westeros beckoned with all its complexities. The north with its vast stretches of land, the Vale perched high among its mountains, the Reach with fertile fields and proud lords, the Stormlands battered by winds and storms. How many swords could he raise if it came to a confrontation? How many would Tywin muster from the Westerlands? The puzzle was too large, too vexing, and his head throbbed from the hours of strain. He closed his eyes briefly, imagining once again that old, simpler life of hunts and feasts and forgetting. When he opened them, the council was watching him. He felt their scrutiny like a weight. Enough for now. Keep me informed of any developments at once. Dismissed. They rose, one by one, bowing as they departed. Ned lingered a moment, meeting Robert's eyes with a look that promised his unwavering support. Then even he left, leaving Robert and Barristan alone. The old knight studied the king's face, concern etched in every line. What is it, Selmy? Robert asked, more gently than before. You bear a great burden, your grace, the knight replied. I do not envy you, but I will stand by you. A man can feel the storm coming. Robert let out a slow breath. Aye, we can all feel it. Even the small folk sense something, I think. Gods help us if it comes to open war. I'd sooner not break the realm again. Barristan bowed his head in sympathy. Perhaps if we are swift and cunning, we can force Tywin to the table with terms, or isolate Jaime and Cersei sufficiently that Tywin dares not intervene for fear of losing face. Then it's all. Robert gave a wry grin. You have more faith in reason than I. Tywin has never been one to cower. Barristan straightened as if coming to attention. You are king. We shall find a way. With that, Barristan took his leave. Robert stayed a few moments longer, gazing at the empty chairs. The hush pressed in on him like a collar of iron. Finally he rose, his decision made to find some respite in the quieter corners of the Red Keep. He roamed the corridors aimlessly at first, passing clusters of servants who bobbed their heads and whispered anxious greetings. Some peered at him with unguarded curiosity, for gossip traveled swiftly in the keep, but Robert ignored them. He climbed a set of worn steps that led to an old gallery seldom used, one that overlooked the great hall through a narrow colonnade. Standing there, he could see the bustling floor below. The long trestle tables, the high seat where the iron throne loomed like a nest of blades, and the lesser courtiers crossing to and fro. At this vantage, Robert felt both removed from them and strangely protective. This was his kingdom. These were his people. And they did not yet know how close they stood to the brink. Part of him wanted to go down there, seize a cup of wine, and roar a bawdy song to dispel the tension in the air. But that was the Robert of old, the Robert before he wore the crown, or perhaps in the early days of his reign, when it still seemed a lark. Now, such easy revelry was impossible. Overshadowed by the betrayal in his own household, he turned away from the hall. The memory of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen flashed across his thoughts. Once, he had tried to be some kind of father to them. He had set Joffrey on his knee, tried to teach him about battles and hunts, only to be met with snide remarks and Cersei's watchful glare. Myrcella and Tommen he had hardly known, overshadowed as they were by their elder brother. Now he suspected they were not his children at all. It pained him more than he cared to admit. He had no illusions that he would have been a good father, but still, did they deserve his hatred? Or were they as much victims of Lannister scheming as he? The question lodged in his mind, stirring a bitterness that had no easy answer. At length, he descended the winding stairs and made his way to his private solar once more. A pair of guards stood outside, men he recognized from the Stormlands. He gave them a nod and stepped in. The room felt stifling, so he opened a window, letting cool evening air wash over him. He saw that a tray of food had been left on a side table: bread, cold meats, a bit of cheese, and a flagon of watered wine. He had little appetite, but forced himself to eat a few bites. The bread turned to paste in his mouth. The cheese tasted sour. He reached for the wine, downed half a cup in a single tilt, scowled at its diluted taste, and set it aside. He paced in front of the hearth, where embers glowed. The day was slipping away. Soon, the city outside would dim into night. He thought of the realm's wide roads and passes, of ravens winging their way to far-flung castles, carrying messages that might shape the future. Would Stannis come at once? Would he bring a fleet from Dragonstone to Blackwater Bay? Robert pictured the grim set of Stannis' jaw as he read the news. Knowing Stannis, he would arrive armed with condemnation, demanding that the Queen be punished for her incestuous treason, that Jaime's head be forfeit. He would push for a direct show of royal authority, even if it sparked war. And Renly? That one was charming but unpredictable, given to sly humor and hidden ambitions. Would Renly stand by his brother, or would he see an opening for himself? Robert groaned inwardly, picturing the possible quarrels between his younger siblings. But any alliance with his own blood was preferable to leaving the Lannisters unopposed. Better the fractious Baratheon clan than the unscrupulous Lion. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, shoulders tense. Just then, a knock sounded at his door. He commanded entry, and a single guard peered in. "Your Grace, Lord Stark is here." "Send him in," Robert said, relieved at the thought of Ned's presence. Ned entered, looking as though he had come from another heated discussion. His expression was grim, but his voice was calm as ever. "Robert, we've found more watchers in the keep than we realized. Varys has been rooting out half a dozen Lannister informants in various corners. Laundry, stables, scullery. The infiltration runs deep." "Gods," Robert said under his breath. "Do they know we know?" "Likely not all of them yet. Varys has been discreet. But we must assume some tidings of our plans have leaked. Sir Barristan has doubled the guard around the Queen's apartments. Jaime remains in the White Sword Tower, though he has demanded a chance to speak in his own defense." "Nabrinten," Robert scoffed. "His own defense? What's there to defend?" His cock found its way to my wife's bed. That's all that matters. Ned watched him carefully. He asked for a hearing before the full council. He claims the rumors are poisonous lies. It's an obvious charade, but he might use it to sow doubt or claim that the king is persecuting a Kingsguard. Then, sir. Robert felt a surge of hot anger. Is that so? Then let him speak if he wants. It will change nothing. Are we so weak that we fear the babbling of a traitor? Ned shook his head. Not fear, but we should be prepared. Jaime has a silver tongue when it suits him. He might slander you, claim you're inventing charges to rid yourself of House Lannister. Be wary. Robert made a sound in his throat. I'll not hush myself for the sake of that incestuous snake. If he wants a hearing, I'll give him one, with half the realm watching, and I'll let the truth ring out. But it can wait until we have more men on our side. I won't give him an open floor to spin his lies in front of the entire court. Not yet. Ned had inclined his head in agreement. Then I'll see that the hearing is postponed, citing the Queen's poor health or some other reason. In the meantime, we tighten the noose. Robert exhaled, some of his anger settling into a dull ache. Yes. And Ned, I must say it plainly. Watch your back. The Lannisters won't hesitate to send assassins. Don't wander alone. Ned allowed a tight smile, more resignation than mirth. I'm aware, old friend. I'll keep men of the north close by. The direwolf still has fangs. They parted with a clasp of hands. Ned departed, leaving Robert once again to the silence of his solar. Evening had well and truly fallen. The corridors of the Red Keep were lit by torchlight and flickering lanterns. Outside his window, the city glimmered like a patchwork of small flames under a vast black sky. From some distant corner, he heard the faint rattle of a watchman's bell. The hour was late. Robert considered ordering more wine, then thought better of it. He had tasks yet, messages to read, strategies to weigh. He sank into a chair by the hearth, letting the mild warmth of the coals brush across his face, and forced himself to focus on the immediate concern. Slowly, methodically, he sifted through the parchments Ned had left. Lists of possible traitors in the keep, notes on which minor lords in the Crownlands might side with House Baratheon over House Lannister, tally sheets of the city's grain stores, the muster of the gold cloaks. He felt the old frustration creeping in. He had never enjoyed such details of governance. He had left much of it to Jon Arryn in the early days, trusting his fatherly wisdom. But Jon was gone, and now the realm's burdens pressed squarely on Robert's shoulders. He rubbed his temples, reading by the flicker of lamplight until his eyes blurred. A soft knock at the door interrupted his labors. Expecting a guard or a messenger, he wearily called for the visitor to enter. To his surprise, a slender figure slipped in. One of Cersei's handmaids, a young woman with anxious eyes. She sank into a quick curtsy. "Your Grace, the Queen wishes to speak with you." Robert felt an immediate twist of anger in his gut. Does she indeed? His words came out rougher than intended. "I have no wish to see her." The maid's eyes widened. "Sheh," insisted I deliver the message. "She said she will wait for you in her solar if you choose to come." Robert glowered at her, then waved a dismissive hand. "You may go." With a tremor in her lip, the maid withdrew, leaving Robert's thoughts in turmoil. Why would Cersei want to see him? Another ploy, no doubt, or some manipulative attempt at forging a deal. He suspected she might offer him hush money to keep the scandal secret, or perhaps she wanted to try once again to deny everything. A wave of disgust washed over him. He was half tempted to ignore the summons entirely. Yet, a stubborn curiosity took hold. If Cersei had the gall to face him, perhaps he could glean some sense of her intentions, or, if nothing else, fling the truth in her face. He stood, stretching his tense muscles, then strode for the door. Pausing in the corridor, he beckoned 2 Stormland guards to accompany him. He would not appear before Cersei with no one at his back. They reached the Queen's solar in short order. 2 more guards of the royal household stood outside, and at Robert's nod, one opened the door. The solar within was softly lit by a single candelabra. It cast long shadows on the walls, dancing with each flicker of flame. Cersei stood near a window, dressed in a flowing gown of emerald green that accentuated the gold in her hair. She looked every inch the regal queen, yet there was a tension in her posture, a purposeful set to her jaw. Robert dismissed the guards to wait in the corridor. He and Cersei were alone. Silence stretched. He met her gaze, seeing in it not contrition, but a simmering pride. At length she spoke, her voice lower and quieter than usual. "Robert, I have asked you here to settle this matter between us." She paused, letting the weight of those words fill the still air. "For the sake of the realm, and for our children." He almost barked a laugh at that last statement. "Our children? Don't pretend we share them. They bear none of my blood." Her face tightened. "They are recognized as your heirs. That is the reality. A reality built on a lie," he snapped. "I will not abide it any longer." She moved away from the window, stepping closer, but keeping a careful distance. Her hands rested over the gentle swell of her belly. "I know you want vengeance. Perhaps you even want me dead. I can see it in your eyes. But you are not a fool. If you condemn me, if you condemn this child, you condemn yourself as well." He narrowed his eyes. "What twisted logic is that?" "You place the realm in jeopardy," she said, her words measured yet laced with fury. "Do you imagine the lords of the realm will stand by as their king proclaims that his own children are bastards? Some might, yes. But half the realm will recoil. They will question your judgment, wonder if you are mad like the Targaryens who came before. Men loyal to the Lannisters will rise to defend us. War will follow. Is that what you wish?" His lips curled. "I wish to see justice done." She made a small, scornful sound. "Justice. You speak of it as if you are a shining knight. We both know you never cared for me, never cared for any child I bore. You drank and whored your way through this marriage. Don't pretend to be a saint now." His anger flared. "Don't you dare cast this on me. You spread your legs for your brother." That struck a spark of hatred in her eyes. "And you, for every camp follower who caught your fancy." A red haze touched his vision. He stepped forward, and for a heartbeat, he felt the old urge to grasp her arm, to shake her until she wept. But the memory of their last clash held him in check. She stood rigid, defiant. He lowered his voice to a near growl. "Why call me here, woman? To exchange more venom?" Her gaze flicked to the open door, then back to him. "Because we are in a dangerous place, you and I. If you persist in trying to expose me, you will set the realm on fire. The Lannisters will not remain idle. My father, my brother, my uncle, they will gather allies. Blood will wash these streets." "Ben says on one. I've known war before," Robert said, though something in him quivered at the memory of flame and steel. "We overcame the Targaryens. This time it is not so simple," she answered, stepping closer. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Do you truly believe all the lords who rallied behind you in the rebellion would do so again, now that you're no new hero but a jaded king? How many gold cloaks will fight to the death for you, rather than accept Lannister coin? How many lords of the Reach, or the Westerlands, or even the Riverlands, will side with you if they see chaos looming? You might still win, but at what cost? Thousands dead, a city in ruins, your position weakened. Is that your legacy? No, sir. He swallowed hard. The image of a burning King's Landing flashed in his mind, a ruin of broken gates and starving crowds. "And so what do you propose?" Her hands pressed on her belly as if to shield the unborn child. "We come to terms," she said. "You let me bear this child in peace. You name it as your heir if it is a son, or accept it as your child if it is a daughter. You keep the throne, and the realm remains stable." "Nor." Robert stared at her, scarcely believing what he was hearing. "You want me to embrace your bastard as my own? To lie to every lord in the 7 kingdoms? You must be mad." She set her chin high. "You would be preserving order. All these years, that is what you have done. Knowingly or not. I suspect deep down you have always known the truth, or at least suspected it. Joffrey's hair alone should have told you. Yet you turned a blind eye. Why? Because acknowledging it was too dangerous. Now, the danger is upon us. A war neither of us wants to fight may erupt. You have a chance to stop it. Take it. Ned. His heart hammered. He recalled fleeting moments from years past, those times he looked at Joffrey and saw not a whit of Baratheon in the boy. Perhaps he had suspected on some level, but had lacked the will to face it. Now that the lie was laid bare, Cersei was offering to patch it over again, as though that might solve everything. He felt a creeping sense of horror, but also the faint allure of an easy out. If he publicly proclaimed that the child was his, refused to hear any rumor otherwise, might the realm stay at peace? Might Tywin remain behind his walls, content that House Lannister still held the next in line to the throne? But the thought was like swallowing bile. That child is Jaime's, he managed through clenched teeth. She nodded once, tight-lipped. It is, but the realm need not know. He felt the pull of conflicting impulses. Part of him wanted to roar, to strike her down for her shamelessness. Another part recognized that, in a twisted way, she spoke a truth. If he forced the issue, war was nearly inevitable. If he accepted the lie, he could keep the throne secure and avoid the horror of further bloodshed. But what of honor? What of justice for the betrayal he had suffered? His hand itched at the memory of grasping Jaime by the throat. He took a step away, swiping a hand across his brow. What of your brother? Am I to just smile and pretend I do not see him skulking around the Red Keep? She paused, as though weighing her words carefully. Exile him, or let him remain under guard if you prefer. The realm knows him as a Kingsguard, so his freedom would normally be guaranteed. But if you name him a traitor for other reasons, you might have cause to send him away to some distant castle. My father might protest, but if you keep me and the children safe, Tywin might accept that as a lesser evil. Father would not want Jaime's imprisonment or death at your hands, but in exile. He might allow it if it keeps the rest of his family in power. And now, Robert shook his head in disbelief. You would sacrifice your own twin so readily. A flicker of pain crossed her face, swiftly hidden. I will do what I must to protect my children and keep our father from bringing down ruin on us all. If that means Jaime must vanish from court life, so be it. Better exile than the headsman's block. Robert stared at her, torn between revulsion and a reluctant admiration for her cold pragmatism. Here she was, a woman who had shattered their marriage bond in the most abhorrent way, yet she had found a path to preserve her own position and even protect her paramour, albeit from afar. She was every inch Tywin Lannister's daughter, cunning and unyielding. He forced a bitter laugh, low in his throat. You want me to uphold your pretty lie? After all the humiliation you've dealt me? Her chin rose, a spark of anger in her eyes again. Did you not humiliate me first? You never loved me. You never gave me a chance to be your wife. From the first day you longed for your dead betrothed, Lyanna Stark. I was a trophy, Robert, and nothing more. Would you claim otherwise? He sucked in a breath, old hurt surfacing. Lyanna Dothian. He still remembered her face, her laughter, but those memories were blurred by the passing years. Perhaps, he said at last, voice hollow, but that does not excuse the path you chose. Her lips thinned. I know, but here we are, both reaping the harvest of our own sins. She stepped close, her tone shifting from anger to a cold entreaty. Let us end this quietly, Robert. If you proceed, you may well win in the end. Jaime and I dead, Tywin forced to bow or face the might of half the realm. But you will also have torn the kingdom asunder, and so many will perish. Is that truly worth it to you, simply so you can stand proud and say your line is untainted? Men. The question struck him like a hammer blow. He thought of the rebellion, of the men he had lost. Friends, loyal bannermen, the small folk cut down in the path of armies. He recalled the stench of bodies after battles, the screams of the wounded. Thousands had died to put him on this throne. Now, for the sake of exposing this treachery, countless more might die, and at the end of it, what would be left for him? The ghosts of war to keep him company. Still, Swallowing the Lannisters' lie felt like a fresh betrayal of everything he held dear. He found no easy answer. "I cannot forgive you," he said at last, voice strained. "And I'll not pretend affection for your bastard, but if war can be avoided by an arrangement, I will consider it. I need time to think, to speak with those I trust." She lifted her chin, relief and wariness mingling in her eyes. "Then think quickly. The rumors grow. Jaime remains caged like an animal. Father will not wait forever. Ned." He stared at her, hating how she still stood so proudly, how not a shred of remorse showed in her bearing. Yet he recognized the desperation beneath her words. "Fine," he said, stepping away. "I'll give you my decision soon, but do not press me." Without another word, he turned and strode out, leaving her in the lamplight. The hallway felt suffocating as the two guards fell in behind him. He practically stormed back to his solar. Once within, he latched the door, bracing himself against it, lungs heaving as though he'd run a race. He wanted to smash something, break the furniture in a raw display of fury, but he held back. The conversation played over and over in his mind, scraping at his pride. She had offered him a way out of war, a path that would keep the realm from another bloodletting. Yet it required him to bury his honor and accept a vile, monstrous lie. His mind churned, picturing the faces of his closest allies: Ned, Barristan, Stannis, Renly, some outraged, some perhaps resigned, if it meant peace. Could he do it? Could he stand in the sight of gods and men and proclaim that Cersei's child was his, welcoming an incestuous product as a Baratheon heir? He dragged himself across the room, poured wine into his cup from the sideboard. The taste flooded his mouth, hot and stinging. He swallowed it with grim determination, then poured another. He stared into the crimson liquid. Even a war might be easier than this. In war, you at least knew who you fought, and you met them with steel. Now, he was confronted by a battle of moral compromise. If he refused, he risked thousands of lives. If he agreed, he sacrificed his honor and the truth. At length, he sank onto a chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He thought of Ned's unwavering sense of right and wrong, and how Ned would recoil at even the idea of continuing the lie. He thought of how Stannis would see it, how that upright man would demand that Cersei and Jaime be punished for treason. He thought of the realm, countless peasants, tradesmen, fisherfolk, blacksmiths, scratching out a living in uncertain times. Then he thought of the men from the Stormlands, from the north, from the Vale, who would march if he called them to arms. Many would die so that Robert Baratheon could punish his wife and her brother. Did that weigh heavier or lighter than his moral revulsion? He drank again, ignoring the bitter aftertaste. No decision would come easily. The next days would be a test unlike any he had known. Slowly, exhaustion seeped into his bones. The hour was late, and if he did not rest, he would face tomorrow half mad with fatigue. He rose, unsteady, moved to his bed. Yet he could not bring himself to remove his garments. He fell onto the covers, staring at the ceiling. The wine's warmth spread through him, dulling his senses. In the half-light of flickering lanterns, old memories stirred. Lyanna's smile, the ring of swords on the trident, the crumbling walls of the capital as they seized it from the Mad King. In his mind's eye, he saw Rhaegar Targaryen's last moments, rubies scattering across the river. That victory had felt so certain, so righteous. Now everything felt drenched in murk. Darkness pressed down. Gradually, he slipped into a heavy sleep. He awoke once in the middle of the night, disoriented by shadows and the taste of stale wine on his tongue. He thought he heard footsteps in the corridor. Voices hushed. Perhaps the guards were changing shift, or someone else was about on secret business. The Red Keep at night was alive with intrigue. He dozed off again, dreaming he was in a vast battlefield where every foe wore a lion's mask, and every blow he dealt revealed another lion beneath. At dawn's first light, Robert stirred, head pounding. He groaned at the dryness in his mouth and the dull ache behind his eyes. When he sat up, the events of the previous night flooded back. He cursed softly, wanting a moment's peace from the burden that weighed on him. He washed, dressed in fresh clothes, and emerged into the corridor. Two of his guards immediately fell in step. Robert felt a surge of gratitude that these men were from the Stormlands, men whose families had served House Baratheon for generations. He might trust them at least, unlike the half-strangers in the City Watch. He headed for the royal kitchens, hoping a hearty meal would settle his stomach. On the way, he encountered Ned Stark, who was striding with purpose from the direction of the training yard. Ned paused, brow creased in concern. "Robert, you look unwell." Robert gave a short laugh. "I slept poorly, that's all." Then he lowered his voice. "The Queen summoned me last night. She wants a truce. She wants me to bury her filth and name her child my heir." Ned's eyes went wide. "She dared to ask that?" Robert nodded grimly. "She argued that war would ruin the realm, that I should accept the lie for the sake of peace. I told her I'd consider. Gods, I wish I could say I refused outright, but I can't ignore the possibility of war, Ned. I have fought one great rebellion already. Do I have the stomach for another? No." Ned's face turned stony. "We cannot let that child inherit the Iron Throne, Robert. The line of succession is sacred. If the Lannisters can place their bastards on the throne with impunity, what is to stop every great house from forging false claims?" Robert's gaze fell. "I know. Yet she is not wrong about the bloodshed to come. Is there not a third path?" He saw Ned's face harden. Clearly his friend thought the question foolish. "I ask only because I have seen enough slaughter to last 100 lifetimes." Ned took a deep breath. "I hear you, old friend. But if we yield on this, the entire concept of royal legitimacy crumbles. You are the rightful king. What befalls the realm if you pass it on to a child fathered by Jaime Lannister?" Robert looked away, the guilt coiling in his gut. "Then the alternative is war. So be it." He let out a harsh sigh. "I will not give in. But first, I want to see if there is a way to curtail the Lannisters without marching on Casterly Rock." "Minister Myro." Ned nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "We must ready ourselves. My men in the north can be summoned, though it will take time for them to arrive. Renly is en route from Highgarden, or so his last letter suggests. Stannis remains silent thus far, but I suspect he'll appear soon enough." Robert forced a grim smile. "Then let us pray that we find a path forward before the city runs red." They parted, each weighed by the burden of these choices. As Robert continued on, he noticed groups of courtiers conferring in corners, hushes descending as he passed. The rumor of scandal was like a roiling storm cloud, shadowing every corridor. He could all but feel the tension pulsing in the air. He reached the kitchens, where the smell of fresh bread and roasting meat hung thick. Normally, he might have grinned at the thought of a good meal, but today he was too knotted inside to take pleasure in simple things. He took only some bread and a bowl of stew, devouring them with mechanical haste. One kitchen servant, a young boy, stared at him with wide eyes, as if frightened the king might strike him down on a whim. Robert ignored the child, finishing his food quickly. Then he left for the courtyard to get some fresh air. Outside, the sky showed pale morning light. The yard bustled with guards changing shifts, knights running drills, stable hands walking horses. Robert paused to watch a pair of men practicing sword work, their wooden blades rattling. One man had a good stance, the other was sloppy. It reminded him of how he had once drilled day after day, preparing for the rebellion. Now, so many years later, here he stood on the threshold of a new conflict. A voice called his name. He turned to see Petyr Baelish approaching, that careful smile on his thin lips. Baelish bowed with a flourish. "Your Grace, I've just come from the Street of Steel. There's quite a bit of talk among the blacksmiths that more swords are being ordered by the keep. Word spreads quickly. Folk are saying the king must be preparing for trouble." "And what of it?" Robert asked, irritated by Baelish's perpetual smirk. "We have cause to bolster our armory." Baelish nodded, seemingly unoffended. "Indeed. But you might want to consider controlling the rumor. Once word truly spreads, we risk panic or at least speculation that war is imminent. People might flee the city or hoard supplies. Prices for flour and salt could spike." Robert exhaled. "Yes, you're right. Put out some story that we're restocking for the king's personal guard, or that we're preparing a new caravan for tournaments. I don't care. Just keep the city calm." "Of course, Your Grace," Baelish said, bowing again. "I shall do my best to shape the narrative. But rumor has wings, especially in King's Landing." "Nisindrar." "Then clip them," Robert snapped and turned away. He spent part of the morning reviewing the mustering of additional guards. Varyston confirmed that the loyal men were stationed at key points, though many more would be needed if a siege should come. Robert's mind flicked to the memory of Arya's final days. The threat that Tywin's army might have sacked the city had events unfolded differently. Now Robert stood on the opposite side, fearing that same unstoppable host. If the lion marched, who would stand in his path? Midday came and went. The sun climbed high, scorching the training yard. Robert decided to retreat inside. But as he crossed the flagstones, he noticed Sir Meryn Trant of the King's Guard approaching with a formal bow. "Your Grace, the Queen asks if you will dine with her in her apartments." Robert's mouth hardened. "No, I will not. Inform her I am otherwise engaged." Sir Meryn hesitated. "As you command." He bowed and departed, leaving Robert unsettled. Twice now, Cersei had reached out. First in the night, now at midday. She was trying to corner him, to remind him of her position, perhaps. Or possibly she feared that time was slipping away, that he would soon make a public move. He felt the swirl of conflicting impulses. Part of him wanted to confront her again, lash out. Another part wanted to avoid her entirely. In the end, he went to the Tower of the Hand to speak with Ned, who was conferring with several knights from the north. The conversation turned to logistics of shipping men down the King's Road. How many weeks it might take for a full host to assemble. Robert listened in grim silence, aware that this was the practical shape of war. No illusions of glory remained in him, only the memory of how each campaign devoured coin, food, and, most of all, lives. As the day wore on, small tasks piled up. Petitions, messages, the swirl of small crises that always plagued a royal court. A stable fire in Fleabottom. A dispute among rival merchants near the Mudgate. A complaint about a corrupt bailiff in Rosby. Robert found little patience for these trifles. He let Ned or Baelish handle most of them, signing the necessary orders with barely a glance. His mind was too occupied with the question of whether he would take Cersei's proposed bargain or tear the realm apart to punish her. By the time dusk settled, the unrelenting heat of the day finally gave way to cooler air. Robert found himself back in his solar, finishing a supper that tasted like ash. Though it was well prepared, he drank sparingly, wary of letting wine cloud his wits at such a critical time. Outside, the courtyard gradually emptied of knights and squires. A hush fell over the Red Keep. The flicker of torches through his window signaled the city's slow descent into night's embrace. He left his chambers, descending to a secluded garden within the castle walls. Lanterns hung from poles, illuminating clusters of fragrant night-blooming flowers. The hush here felt different, heavy with the scent of greenery rather than tension. He remembered once bringing Marguerite Tyrell, or had it been some other lady, on a stroll here long ago. The details were lost in memory. Now he only felt the weight of all that had happened since. Even the garden's calm was tainted by the knowledge of the turmoil around him. As he strolled, he spotted a dark shape near a hedge. His hand went to his belt out of reflex, though he had left his sword behind. Then the figure stepped into the glow of a lantern, revealing itself as Varys, clad in a soft gray robe. "Your Grace," the spymaster said smoothly. "A lovely evening for reflection, is it not?" Robert eyed him warily. "Have you taken to haunting gardens now?" Varys offered a small bow. "I find them quite conducive to quiet thought. And tonight, I have come to think of you, if I may be so bold. I suspect your mind is troubled." "No." Robert scowled. "Troubled hardly captures it." Varys folded his hands. "Then consider me a sympathetic ear, if you so desire." Robert hesitated. He had never liked the idea of confiding in a man known for secrets. But perhaps there was a certain advantage in hearing Varys' perspective. The spymaster claimed to serve the realm after all, and he likely knew more about the city's mood than anyone. "I've no shortage of advisors," Robert said stiffly. "But speak, if you have something to say." Varys dipped his head. "I shall be brief. The Queen is indeed reaching out to you, hoping you will choose a quiet resolution. She has also sent messages to certain lords, though not openly. I suspect she is attempting to build a safety net, should you move against her." Robert's pulse kicked up. "Who?" Varys spread his hands. "I have not traced all of them yet. Some letters likely ride with couriers into the night. But I do know a raven was dispatched to Casterly Rock not long ago. Another flew to River Run, for reasons I cannot yet discern. Though remember that Cersei's mother was once a Tully, so there may be an appeal to old ties." "Men?" Robert grit his teeth. "So she's making her own alliances." "She wastes no time. Nor should you, your grace," Varys said gently. "Time is seldom kind to uncertain rulers. The city stirs with rumors. The lords wait to see who shall emerge triumphant. If I may suggest, do not delay too long in making your choice. A drawn-out uncertainty only gives your enemies more opportunities." Robert studied the spy master's solemn gaze. "So you think I should crush her now or make peace?" Varys gave a slight bow. "I would never presume to tell you which path to choose. That is yours alone. But be aware the hour grows late, and the realm quivers on a knife's edge." With that cryptic warning, Varys slipped away into the darkness, leaving Robert alone with his swirling thoughts. The garden's fragrance now felt cloying, as if the very flowers were suffocating him. He returned to the castle interior, the lamplit halls feeling lonely and cold. At last he found himself back at his chambers, the guards saluting as he passed. Inside, exhaustion claimed him, heavier than any cloak. He sank onto a chair, staring at the guttering flame of a lantern, half wishing the walls would speak the answer he could not find. Hours passed in restless half-sleep. He roused more than once, pacing the chamber, gazing out the window at the moonlit city. The recollection of Cersei's proposition returned again and again, like a persistent echo. Sometimes, the notion of accepting it, of forging a tenuous peace, seemed like the only way to spare the kingdom. Other times, the very idea made him burn with shame and rage. He forced himself to consider scenarios. If he publicly denounced the Queen, proving that her children were not his, the Lannisters would rally. War would ensue. If he quietly accepted her child, proclaiming it as his own, he would be complicit in the lie. No one would dare question the king openly, at least not until he died, and that child ascended the throne. Gods, what a tangled knot. The realm might be saved, but House Baratheon's name would be a mockery. He found no resolution, only a deepening sense of doom. Eventually, the first glow of dawn came through the window, painting the sky a weary gray. Robert stood, feeling stiff from the night's vigil. He wished he could fling off the burden and gallop away to some distant corner of the country, as he might have done in his youth. Instead, he had to play the king in a deadly game of pride, power, and survival. He dressed slowly, his face set like stone. The day ahead would bring fresh challenges. There would be new reports from Ned, new whispers from Varys, more maneuvering from Cersei, more demands from Jaime. And overshadowing it all was Tywin Lannister's certain response, whatever shape it might take. The thought churned in Robert's gut as he prepared for another day of carefully veiled conflict. With a last glance at the rising sun, he stepped into the corridor, guards forming around him. Once more, he would walk the path of a king, wrestling with a choice no sword could cut clean. As he made his way toward the council chambers, the faint echoes of his footsteps seemed to underscore how very alone he felt, even in the midst of all these people who called him Your Grace. And alone he would remain until he made the hardest decision of his reign, one that could spare countless lives or shatter everything he had ever fought for.